Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Handy Quilter, designed by a quilter for quilters. Sulky, express yourself with Sulky and create with confidence. Brother, it's so easy with Brother at your side. And Quilt Cut, easy fabric cutting for quilters. Hi, and welcome to Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community. I'm Mary Kate Carr-Petras, and with us today is our very special guest, Judy Martin. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you.
Most people know Judy from her career as a quilt designer and prolific author, and this actually represents a bit of a homecoming for you because you used to work for Quilters Newsletter many years ago. But let's backtrack a little bit more. We want to hear, tell us a little bit more about how you got started in quilting, what your first quilt looked like. Did anybody in your family quilt?
Nobody in my family quilted. My mother sewed. She sewed all her clothes, which is why I started sewing. My first quilt, I just rediscovered. I'd forgotten I made it when I was 9 years old, and it was a doll quilt. And it's made out of squares, but I don't think I used a template. I think I just freehand cut them.
Very modern.
G's Bend style.
Improvisational.
Yes.
Nice.
And,
but what do you consider your first real quilt?
The one that I consider my first real quilt, I made in 1969. I came home from college for Thanksgiving, and my parents had moved, and I didn't have a bedroom anymore, and I was looking for some of my things that I'd left behind, and found a box of sewing scraps and decided to make a quilt. I'd never seen a quilt.
Interesting.
But I knew my mother always gave our sewing scraps to the people at church who made quilts, so I decided to make one.
Did you have batting? I mean, what did you?
Yes, I did use batting.
All right, so you knew that much at least.
I did.
Okay.
My mother told me to use a 1/4-inch seam allowance too, so I had that idea. But I thought quilts were all uniform squares, and I thought I would be really revolutionary and use squares and rectangles.
Again, pushing the boundaries.
Pushing the boundaries, and I thought they were every fabric that you had, and I limited it to red, white, and blue.
Okay.
So I thought that was also revolutionary. So.
And then you went back to school?
I went back to school, and then whenever I went to the fabric store, which I'd sewn for years, so I was always going to the fabric store. Whenever I went to the fabric store, all I could see was quilts. And I just had to buy the fabric to make the quilts, and then I had to make the quilts.
So you kept making it?
I kept making quilts while I was in school, not very quickly, but I kept making them. And then continued after that too. My methods were entirely made up.
Okay, I was going to ask, did you take classes or?
No.
Because by this point we're in the 70s and
right.
Quilting was starting to experience a resurgence, but was there a lot around for you to refer to or talk to?
No, there were very few books. Okay. I finally, my sister gave me 101 Patchwork Patterns by Ruby Short McKim. And that was my first introduction to traditional quilt patterns. And I was really kind of...
Not a bad introduction.
Not bad, but I was kind of devastated. I thought, oh, it's all been done before, and there's nothing new in the world. And I made traditional quilts for a number of years before I started seeing that there were things that were not done yet, and that I could still use my own creativity beyond the selection of fabric and patterns. So.
And when did you start working for QN?
I started working for Quilters Newsletter in 1979. So I'd been making quilts for 10 years. And I just had odd jobs and tried to make quilts in my spare time. Sometimes I sold quilts at a farmer's market type situation. And I think that I was feeling, as I approached 30, I was feeling that my parents might be embarrassed that this is all that came of me after they sent me to college, where I studied animal behavior. Not
related to quilts at all.
No, and I don't mean cows and stuff, I mean gorillas and
okay, so like psychology.
Spiders and stuff.
Okay,
right.
All right.
So I decided to read What Color Is Your Parachute, which is, I think they still market that book. It's an excellent book. It would never have occurred to me to look for a job that I wanted. I thought you had to look for a job that was available. And so I asked for a job at Quilters Newsletter magazine. They weren't looking to hire particularly, but I asked for a job. I decided that's what I wanted to do. And they wanted to have me. So I moved to Colorado and
wow, so you moved here from out of state
Right.
for this job.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And when you say they, we're talking partly about Bonnie Lehman,
Bonnie
who
Lehman.
founded Quilters Newsletter
Right.
in
I
1969.
worked for, yes,
You worked for Bonnie.
the original staff here.
Do you have any anecdotes that you can share with kind of somebody who never got to meet her or work with that original staff?
I just remember how fun it was to brainstorm with her. Just having ideas about patterns or marketing or anything, we just clicked. And it was really fun to do that.
I've heard she was just a really great person to work with. Just, you know, she was a businesswoman and she was very serious about her job, but she was really a wonderful boss to have.
Right,
Is that true?
And she was such a fine addition to quilting.
Yes.
So.
Well, we're very proud of the legacy that she has in the quilting world. But you left after how many, like 7 years?
8 years, almost
okay.
8 years, and I left to work at home, and my husband and I started a publishing company, and I did a book, a baby, a book, a baby, and then we thought that was enough of the baby part.
Yeah.
So we've published 15 books now.
They're all self-published under
Yes,
your okay.
and just my husband and I working there, and it's been great. It's a great way to raise a family.
What were some of
I
your
don't know
favorite?
if they got much of a work ethic. My kids got much of a work ethic watching us, because whenever they'd come home, we'd stop working.
That sounds like a really nice combination of a work-life
It was.
combination balance, which can be difficult to strike because it's hard to get work done when the little kids are crawling around on the floor or you know, clamoring for attention. And what are some of the books that you were publishing in those early years? Some titles that people might know.
Oh, the first book that we published was Judy Martin's Ultimate Book of Quilt Block Patterns. And
those were your own design?
my own designs, mostly my own designs. I included some traditional favorites. And part of the reason I did a block book was because I didn't have time to quilt the things, and I didn't have a stable of people working for me, and actually the long armors weren't out in force yet at that time. So I did 2 block books first, and then went on to some of my books. Early books had quilt tops instead of quilted ones.
Okay.
But my recent books all have quilted examples.
Yes, yes. And so you by that point you said you were designing your own quilt blocks and creating your own designs.
Right.
Where do you start? What are some of your design inspirations?
Well, my designs are all rooted in tradition, and they're getting farther from tradition, but as the years go by. But they're rooted there, and people still mistake my designs for traditional patterns a lot. But what I generally do when I'm designing is there's already something waiting in the wings, because one thing leads to another, and you think, oh, I could have done this too, and then you've got your next quilt planned. Or sometimes you don't do it for a year or two, but the idea was from an earlier quilt. Let me tell you an example. In my book, Piece Borders, that I wrote with Marcia McCloskey, I designed a border from stars, and rather than having the stars just all in a row, I staggered them. And the reason I did this is I was lazy and I didn't want to have to sew the joints that you'd get if you had them all in a row. So, but I like the look. I like the look. I'm lazy, but I do things for the look.
Sure.
So what's best for the quilt is what I end up doing. And so this quilt that that's in the photograph here is Star Happy, from my book Star Happy Quilts, and it has this border that was in the book Piece Borders, and the stars are staggered there, and that was it was based on a traditional variable star block, and my addition to it was staggering them. And then in this next quilt, Circle of Life, what I did was I took the staggering, and instead of making it a border, I made that the quilt center. And so the stars, and it's a different star, it's an original star that I put in the same kind of piecing that I would have used for the border, but made it the quilt center.
Okay.
And then in this third example, it's Thanksgiving from my book Patchwork Among Friends. And I took, not a star this time, I took a maple leaf block and made it small and made 8 of those staggered the same way to make a block. And then I had a lot of these blocks in the Thanksgiving quilt.
Okay.
So one thing just leads to another. And sometimes it's not directly, sometimes it's years later.
Sure, but you're still building upon the innovation of the last
And it all builds on the tradition. I mean, the maple leaf block is a traditional element. And it was just the organization. Sometimes it's the blocks that are original, and sometimes it's the sets.
Okay, and so what do you have coming up next?
Well, what I have coming up next is a book called Extraordinary Log Cabin Quilts. And I brought 2 examples here today. This one is called Honeymoon Log Cabin. And it occurred to me that hearts would work in a log cabin arrangement in the same way that it's almost divided in half, the block almost divided in half to dark and light. And so in order to make the hearts stand out when they were next to other hearts, I made pink hearts alternating with red hearts. And I have here logs mostly, but there are also some trapezoids in this one, which I don't generally get into in my log cabin quilts, but they make such a nice illusion of a curve in the heart. And the other example that I brought from my new book is called Door County Log Cabin. And what I was trying to do was to make the illusion of curves using just rectangles and squares. And what I have here is, the arrangement is variable, just like in any log cabin quilt. And you can have like the donut shape in the middle, and then these half donuts around that. My husband calls these quarter ones slinkies.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then I added the border that echoes the curved illusion that the block has.
Now, I don't want to scare anybody, but can you tell us the smallest patch that's in this
The
book?
smallest patch is cut 3/4 inch by 1.5 inch to end 1/4 inch by 1 inch.
Right.
Right. And it's really not anything to be afraid of.
No, it just, again, as we were talking about before, you know, some of these things, we think of these as scraps, you know, they end up in the trash can. And here we are going to be cutting them for this, but it really does lend that curved look that you're talking about.
You really do need the logs to very gradually change length. This is not like the curved log cabins that change the width of the log. This is done by changing the length of the log. Right.
Well, it's a great effect. It really
you.
is a great effect, and especially whether it's viewed up close and you can really see the size of those patches and the variety of the fabrics, or from far away you get this great modern graphic look. It's really beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here with us, Judy. It's been a real honor.
Thank you for having me.
We hope you come back.
Oh, I will be back.
Fantastic.
All right.
Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Handy Quilter, designed by a quilter for quilters. Sulky, express yourself with Sulky and create with confidence. Brother, it's so easy with Brother at your side. And Quilt Cut, easy fabric cutting for quilters.